ladies and gentlemen, you'll find in your seats notepads with a pen. That is so if you want to take notes, you may do so. You are not required to take notes. If you do not want to take notes, do not take notes. If everybody else is taking notes and you don't want to, do not take notes. I want to urge you, if you don't want to, you do not have to. But if you want to, that's what these notepads are for. Notes are an aid to individual memory. They prove nothing to anyone else on the jury. Notes of one juror are not entitled to any greater dignity than the memory of another juror. So be mindful of how these notes may be used. During any recess period, you will fold your notes over and leave them at your seat. They will be collected at the end of the day. They will not be read. When you come back tomorrow morning, you'll find them in your seat. If you don't, for sure, let me know right then. Again, they're an aid to individual memory. If you don't want to take notes, don't take notes. If you want to, that's what they're for. Anything direct for the state of the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
Can you have us of the hat state of North Carolina?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Lieutenant Jeremy Dove.
Your pleasure, right hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear the evidence you should in the court and the jury should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Please with you.
Sir, can you state your name for the record?
Jeremy Dove,
And Jeremy Dove, where do you work?
Lewisburg Police Department in West Virginia.
And what is your position with the Lewisburg, West Virginia Police Department?
I'm a lieutenant.
Okay. And how long have you been working with Lewisburg, West Virginia Police Department?
I've been with Lewisburg Police Department for 15 years now.
Were you working on or about January 1st, 2015?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall that day?
Yes, I do.
Were you scheduled to work that day?
Yes.
Can you tell the jurors how your day began and how your shift started?
My shift that day, I was working 11 a.m. to 9 o'clock p.m. After working, I worked 5 p.m. to 3 a.m. the previous shift. Started out, Lewisburg has every New Year's Day, they have a parade called the Shanghai Parade. So I came to work in time. The parade lasts usually about an hour. And it started out, other than the parade, it was kind of a slow shift, not a whole lot going on.
Lieutenant Dove, did you have anybody working with you that day?
Yes, Nick Sams was working with me that day, and he was riding with me.
Is that usual, unusual for you?
It is unusual for me. Nick had just been hired with the Lewisburg Police Department. I believe that was his 5th day at work, and he usually rides with someone else. I'm not usually a training officer, but I was, his normal training officer was not working that day. Excuse me. So he was with me.
After the parade, did you get a call that drew your attention to the interstate?
Yes.
And what was that call?
We had received an alert from our dispatcher who said that the license plate reader that's located on I-64 had picked up a license plate that was stolen from North Carolina.
Are you familiar with the basic operation of the license plate reader?
Yes.
And what does it do?
It takes a picture of the license plate, and if that license plate has been entered into NCIC, it will take a picture of the vehicle and it will report to our dispatch center. Once the dispatch center gets that message, it's relayed to us.
What is NCIC?
The National Crime Information Center. It's a database. If there's a stolen license plate, stolen car, if there's a gun that's been stolen, basically anything with a serial number that can be put into this database. If there's somebody who's wanted for a crime or somebody who's missing, it's just a database in almost kind of a catch-all.
As a result of receiving this call, what did you and Patrolman Sands do?
We drove to I-64 and parked at one of the emergency turning lanes and watched for a white Suburban traveling south, or I'm sorry, traveling west.
Relative to the rest of the state, where is Lewisburg located in the state of West Virginia?
It's in Greenbrier County, which is southeast part of the state.
How close is that to the Virginia state line?
I think about 20 miles.
Okay. Is the Lewisburg exit one of the first exits that you arrive after going across the state line?
It is the third.
Lieutenant Jeremy Dove, what happened next?
The Suburban passed us, so pulled in behind it, made a traffic stop. The Suburban went from the right lane to the left lane, back to the right lane, and then pulled over. And there was a red Chevy truck that pulled over ahead of the white Suburban.
Now, had you activated your blue lights by this time?
Yes, my emergency lights were on. I called the license plate in the dispatch, told them that I'd found it, and had them ask them to verify that it was stolen.
Is your car equipped with an in-car camera?
Yes, it is.
And does it normally activate when the blue lights are activated?
Yes. Yes, the camera starts to record after the lights are turned on.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
Lieutenant Dove, I'm approaching with an object that's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 1. Have you seen that before?
Yes, I have.
And what is it?
It's a copy of the video that was taken from my car on January 1st, 2015.
Have you had an opportunity prior to today to review the recording that's contained on this compact disc?
Yes.
And does it fairly and accurately represent the events as you perceived them that day?
Yes.
And do you remember the events of that day?
Yes.
And have you compared the two of them and are satisfied that it does, in fact, fairly and accurately represent those?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would move that this compact disc be moved in for illustrative purposes.
Any objection? Yes, sir. Motion left.
Okay. Would this aid you in your testimony to the jury?
Yes, sir, it would.
Your Honor, I'd request permission to publish this to the jury.
Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you can't see this, let me know. If you have to make sure that all of you are in position to see. Can you see from where you are? Okay. That's fine.
Now, if I could approach the TV, sound a little better pulled out.
Yes.
within NCIC. It was reported as being stolen. The license plate, there's a camera that reads license plate. That license plate has been reported as being stolen. Did you ever have a license plate stolen and reported? No. Does the company your name or your name? Come on over here where I can hear it. Who's the registered owner? Right here. One guy down, red Chevy truck, 1500. It's got some shit on the right, thing in the back. Two of us have been shot. Two of us have been shot, Cody. One suspect is down, he's still breathing. Silver
Lieutenant Dove, do you have an explanation as to why the audio has changed?
Yes, the microphone for the camera was, I can't remember if I had it on my belt or had it on my shoulder, but it was out of range of the camera because there's, when I walked back towards the ambulances, and then the fire chief at the time, he had taken my shirt and my gun belt off to secure them. So they're probably in a fire truck at this point, and that's why there's no audio.
And so is the sound diminished throughout the rest of the video? Now, Lieutenant Dove, you were obviously off camera during this time. Where were you standing relative to your patrol car?
I was standing in front of my car.
And why did you ask Eric to step back there with you?
The call came in as a stolen license plate, which in and of itself is still a misdemeanor, but I didn't know if it was I didn't know if the call was just a stolen license plate, if it was something more minor, or if it was something more serious. And since I didn't know, I didn't approach the vehicle. I had Eric Campbell come back to me because it's safer for me. And we also went to the trunk of my car because with the windows blacked out, I can't see inside the Suburban. So I don't want to be in front of the car in case there's people inside the vehicle. I can't see them. So it's just safer for me. Plus I can watch traffic also that's on the interstate.
Now, there was one voice that was on the recording kind of giving direction. Is that your voice?
Yes.
Lieutenant Dove, I noticed no cars going in the interstate. Is the interstate closed at this point?
Yes, I had closed the interstate because there were deputies that needed to be on the road to get to the Suburban.
Lieutenant Dove, was that you that just left in that ambulance? Or was that someone else?
I think that was someone else.
Okay. How many?
I can't swear to it, but
How many officers went to the hospital with them?
3. There was Nick, Sam's, another officer that had pulled up on scene just as the gunfight started, Mike Arball. He went because of his blood pressure, and then I went.
Lieutenant Dove, was the scene turned over from the Lewisburg Police Department to another agency?
Yes, once other officers showed up on scene, I backed away.
Okay. Lieutenant Dove, what are they looking at in this frame?
I would imagine they're looking at Edward Campbell.
What was off to the far right off screen?
There's a guardrail, and then it's not a ditch, but the interstate right there is built up, so it's a steep drop off.
Now, looking further back into the distance there, it looks like the terrain changes.
Yes.
And is that fairly representative of what happens in that area at the divide?
Yes.
Okay, how would you describe the terrain in that area?
Elevation changes and rocky, a lot of trees.
Lieutenant Dove, do you have calls about license plate reading?
Can you repeat
Do
that,
you
please?
have calls about the license plate reader very often?
Not very often, but from time to time. They, for whatever reason, they seem to come and go in spurts.
And because of that, I mean, how do you approach one of these stops?
We've had calls in the past, in fact, prior to this call, maybe a month or so before this, we had a call of a stolen license plate, and we stopped the truck that had the stolen license plate, and it turned out, for whatever reason, DMV had issued, the man had, his license plate was stolen. He reported it to DMV, and they reissued the exact same license plate. So it came up as stolen, even though in that case it wasn't stolen. We also have calls where, for example, a car rental company, maybe somebody rents a car and doesn't return it on time, it gets reported as stolen, and then somebody eventually brings the car back and rents it to someone else, then that person may pass one of these license plate readers and the car comes back as stolen because maybe the car company didn't let the officer know that the car had returned, or maybe the officer forgot to let dispatch know to take that license plate out of NCIC.
Lieutenant Dove, did you recognize anyone else from the video we just watched?
Yes.
Anyone here in this courtroom today?
Yes, I recognized Eric Campbell.
Okay. And even though it may not have been captured on the video, at any time did he alert you that about his father?
No.
Did he tell you that he had a gun?
No.
Did he tell you that his father had a gun?
No.
At any time did Eric Campbell give you any warnings as to what was getting ready to happen?
No.
Yes, sir.
Lieutenant Dove, I'm handing you a photograph that has been marked as State's Exhibit 2. Can you take a moment and examine it?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize it?
Yes, sir, I do.
How do you recognize it?
That's the back of my head and the cut on the back of my head.
Have you had an opportunity to look at that photograph before?
Yes.
Does it fairly and accurately represent things as they appeared on or about the day that it was taken?
Yes.
Would it aid you in illustrating your testimony to the jury?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibit 2 be admitted into evidence for illustrative purposes.
Any objection?
No, sir.
Motion allowed.
Your Honor, I'd like to get permission to publish that to the jury.
Yes, Mr. Sheriff. Ladies and gentlemen, State's Exhibit number 2 is going to be passed among you, should be viewed carefully, individually, and without comment.
Your Honor, I'll be able to publish it on the
You can
television.
focus on that.
Yes.
That's fine. You may do so.
Is that the same picture that you saw just a moment ago, Lieutenant Dove?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and can you describe, and you feel free to step down and approach it, but just tell the jury what that shows.
That's the back of my head. On scene, I knew that I had been hit by a bullet, but what I thought had happened was I thought for somehow maybe the bullet had gone, I thought maybe the bullet had hit me right in here and for whatever reason didn't go through my skull. I honestly expected just to have a tiny hole in the back of my head. I had no idea there was a cut. What had happened was when Edward Campbell pulled out the gun, I had turned my body, and when he shot, I usually carry a radio mic right here on my shoulder, and the bullet hit that radio mic, and the shrapnel from the bullet and from the radio microphone cut the back of my neck. So I didn't know until I got in an ambulance. I didn't know that cut. I didn't know I was cut. I honestly just expected a tiny hole.
Lieutenant Dove, you were taken away by ambulance, as you just mentioned.
Yes.
And did you have to undergo any kind of surgery or anything to repair that injury?
Yes, the doctor had to administer anesthesia. I think he said I don't remember exactly what he did, or I don't know the medical terms, but basically he used a lot of tiny stitches inside the wound to heal that up, and then used, I think they called them, I want to say mattress stitches, but I don't know if that's the correct term or not, but bigger stitches just to close the outside of the wound.
Lieutenant Dove, how long approximately were you out of work?
I was out of work, I believe it was just under 2 weeks.
Your Honor, we would tender Lieutenant Dove this time.
Witnesses,
How many years have you been with the Lewisburg Police Department?
I've been with Lewisburg Police Department for 15 years.
Is that the only department you've worked for?
No, I worked for the City of Beckley Police Department for just under 3 years.
And is that total 18 years of experience?
Yes, sir.
When you were in your role as a lieutenant, or are you still a patrol officer?
We're a small department, so usually I'm assigned to detective, doing investigations, things like that. When we're shorthanded, which we were at the time that this happened, I do whatever needs done.
Right.
If that means work patrol, I'll work patrol.
So were you already a lieutenant on that particular day?
Yes.
So you had already been through. And prior to that, had you been through the ranks up to lieutenant, patrol officer, and all that?
Yes, sir.
As part of your how long did you train? Did you become an officer?
The police academy, the basic course is through the West Virginia State Police Academy, and it's about 3.5 months.
And do you know, did the other officers who were there go through that same 3.5 month training?
Yes.
Now, one of the officers, I think was it Officer Sams? Was he new to the force?
Yes, Officer Sams was new. We had just hired him.
But he had been through that training program.
Yeah. We hired Nick Sams after he graduated from the police academy.
Now, what about Officer, is it Arball?
Yes.
And who does he work with?
Our ball also works for the Lewisburg Police Department.
And so he had come up, he was in a separate car,
That's correct.
and Officer Sams was with you.
Yes.
And did Officer Arball go through that? He had been through that same training as well, 3.5 months of training prior to joining. Is that right?
Yes. Everybody has to go through the same training.
How long do you know how long Officer Arball had worked with Lewisburg Police Department?
I believe he's been there for over 20 years.
And so he's an experienced officer.
Yes.
Did he come because of the traffic stop as sort of a second car to have a second person or a second car on hand?
Yes.
Back up, so to speak.
Yes.
I want to show a little bit of this video again and ask you a couple of questions from that if I can, Lieutenant Duff. We can put that. Sorry. Can you point out when you see one of the trucks or the SUV go by?
Are you going to ask me to pause it then?
Yeah.
To be clear, are you want me to let you know when I see the truck?
Or the SUV.
Okay.
What the
There goes the truck.
Was that the truck? Okay.
Yes.
So
And there went the
SUV 's
SUV.
behind. Okay. You don't need. Now, did you turn your blue lights on when you went out at this point?
No, you're gonna see on the top of the screen, there's gonna be a red W and a red L. And that means wireless mic and lights.
So that's when it's up at the top.
Yes.
WL, is that when you turn on your blue lights?
Yes.
And so is this one of those programs where the recording starts? Now, what do you see, if you would pause right there, you see in front there of the car?
What do I see in front of
The car to the left of the SUV.
I see the red truck.
Does that appear to be the red truck?
Yes.
And does it have its turn signal on?
It looked like it was.
Okay, if you continue to play. And what does the SUV do?
Use its brakes and turns on its turn signal.
Left turn signal.
Yes.
And then when the red truck goes back to the right, what does the white truck do?
Goes to the right with its turn signal.
Now, Lieutenant Dove, so based on your experience, you had already decided, or you had concluded that the white car was following the red truck, or they were at least traveling, both of them stopped, so your conclusion was that they were traveling together, is that right?
Yes.
And so based on your training, you decided not to approach the white SUV and just ask the driver to come back to you?
That's correct.
Where were you standing when you made that request?
If I remember correctly, I was standing outside my door.
So you actually got outside your door and asked the driver to come back?
Yes.
Can you give me some perspective as to how far you are from the SUV? Because it's a little hard to tell from the videotape.
I would have to guess 15 to 20 feet, but I'm not very good at distance.
Yeah, that's fine. Is it sort of, I mean, if you're the driver of that SUV, would you be sort of where I'm standing, or?
Can you say that again, please?
Let's say if you're in the driver's seat of the SUV, I guess in the back of the SUV, would you be sort of back here, or?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Well, I mean, I guess I'm trying to figure out how, you're not on the camera, so
That's
you
correct.
can't see where you are, but you're outside your door.
Yes.
How far do you think you are from the driver?
That's what I was guessing, the 15 to 20
Okay,
feet,
so 15, 20 feet away.
if I had to guess.
And you asked him to get out of the car.
Yes.
Now, when you asked him to get out of the car, did he do that?
Yes.
And when he got out of the car, did he have his hands in his pocket or anything like that?
No.
At that point, you've sort of described a range of the types of traffic stops you made. Have you made a lot of traffic stops in your career?
Yes.
And I would assume that there's a big range of the type of people you deal with. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So you don't take anything for granted necessarily when you do a traffic stop, or you try not to, I assume.
That's true.
So when you asked Eric to come back to your car, at some point there were cars whizzing by, is that right?
Yes.
So at the same time you're concerned for your safety, is it fair to say you're concerned for the driver's safety as well?
Yes.
Where did you direct him to go? Because he comes off the camera.
I asked him to join me at the back of the police car, because by that time, as he was walking towards me, I also backed up to get behind the car.
Okay. So if you could come down and help me out just a little bit. Is that okay, Judge?
Yes.
Sort of, I don't know, maybe we can use this area here as the back of your car. Is this where you asked him to come to the back?
Yes.
And was he standing closer to the road, or did you get him to stand in the inside of the highway?
If I remember
When I say
correctly,
him, I mean Eric.
if I remember correctly, probably more towards the middle of what would be my trunk.
So you were over here, you had him come over here. Now, he did not put his hands in his pocket or threaten you in any way. You did not,
No.
you didn't have any concern for your safety as far as he was in the way he was responding to you.
I still didn't trust him.
Of course.
I still don't. I was still watching him. I was also watching Edward because I could see him coming back. But just because there's not a threat present at that time doesn't necessarily mean that he can't become a threat later.
Right. He's a stranger to you, and he's also, there's a stolen license plate on the car. So
Yeah.
you're on guard,
Yes.
and you've been trained to deal with situations like that. Is that right?
Yes.
And so, but Mr. Campbell had his hands out. That's the first thing. You don't want his hands in his pocket. Is that right?
That's true.
And at no time did he do that.
No.
Did you at any point, did you even get to the point where you could frisk him to see if he had any weapon?
No, we never made it that far.
Now, if you're standing at the back of your car and Mr. Eric Campbell is standing here, where's Officer Arball?
At this time, Arball was pulling up behind us and was getting out of his vehicle, which he drives one of the new Ford Explorers. He was getting out of his vehicle and he was about the left front fender when the gunfight started.
So he was out of his car and up sort of toward the front of his car.
Right, he was walking towards the front of his car.
Where was Officer Sanders?
I don't remember if Sam's was on this side of me or if he was over here closer to Eric. I don't remember.
So there were two of you closer to Eric, and then there was Officer Arball walking up from the back.
Yes.
And then when you saw, you could see Edward Campbell coming from the side of the SUV, didn't you?
Yes.
And did you see him walk all the way up?
Yes. I saw him walk up when he was on the right shoulder of the interstate. When he was closer to the roadway, I couldn't see him because of the Suburban.
Right. You saw him come down the side of the Suburban or
Right.
around.
I saw him come down the passenger side of the Suburban.
And walk up toward you.
Yes.
And the only thing you said to him was something about, when I say him, I mean Edward Campbell, something about the license plate being stolen.
Yes.
And you can have a seat.
Thank you. Excuse me.
And Edward Campbell gave you no warning that he had a gun, did he?
No.
He did not hesitate when he started shooting, did he?
No.
And there were 3 trained officers standing there, weren't there?
Yes.
And he attacked so quickly that you were the only one who was able to respond, isn't that right?
Yes, I was the only one who returned fire.
The other 2 officers weren't even able to shoot back.
That's correct.
All they could do was take cover. Is that right?
No, I don't believe Sam's ever had a chance to take cover.
So he never even had a chance to get out of the way after the shooting started. He just got shot.
Yes.
And Officer Allball never had the chance to return fire, did he?
No.
And you were able to get your gun out and shoot back. Is that right?
Yes.
And that was your training.
Yes.
It was your training that saved you from Edward Campbell, isn't that right?
It could be training. I can't tell you what saved me from Eric Campbell, or I'm sorry, from Edward Campbell.
But it was your training that told you to pull the gun and shoot back,
Yes,
and you actually hit him, didn't
yes.
you? And did you know that he shot all of the bullets in his gun?
No,
But you do know that he sent three officers to the hospital that day.
yes.
Now, I know that there was a lot after the shooting happened where the officers were clearing the SUV. There was some time where several officers converged to clear the SUV, is that right?
Yes,
And that's because a vehicle that size could be a place where a person could take cover, isn't that right?
it's a big vehicle, but also we couldn't see through the glass.
But it's got a place where people could get behind it and shoot back at you too, couldn't it?
Yes,
And Eric Campbell didn't turn and shoot at you at all, did he?
no,
In fact, he ran immediately, didn't he?
yes.
Yeah, just a minute there. Nothing further.
Rick, just a couple questions. To clarify, Lieutenant Dove, was Captain Arbor, was he ever struck by a projectile?
No,
He went to the hospital why?
blood pressure is my understanding.
Okay. At that point, he had been involved in an officer-involved shooting, is that right?
Yes,
Would it be appropriate for him to conduct any kind of investigation or anything like that?
at that point, no.
And it would make sense to have him checked out,
Yes,
right? And so the only two people that were injured by Edward Campbell were you and Patrolman Sands, is that right?
that's correct.
Now, did you have any kind of idea why they were traveling together, or what did you assess their situation as you pulled them over?
When both of them pulled over together, I thought maybe they were just traveling together.
All right, did you notice the mattress in the back of the truck?
I knew that there was something in the back of the truck, but I didn't know what.
Did you have any kind of speculation or idea about where you thought, what was going through your mind as to where they were going?
I really didn't know, other than I thought, there's a possibility that they're moving, they're traveling together, but at that point, I didn't know.
I don't have any other questions for Lieutenant Dove.
Lieutenant Dove, it's fair to say that whatever you thought, you did not predict what happened would happen, did you?
No.
Nothing further.
Your Honor, that'll be all the questions Lieutenant Dove asked.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Stand there. Did you ask him that he be excused from this thing?
Yes.
Any objection?
No, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Brother Evans,
Yes, sir, Your Honor. The state will call Nicholas Sands.
Your pleasure, left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Do you solemnly swear that evidence you should give the court and the jury should be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you please state your name for the court?
Nicholas Sams.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed with the Lewisburg Police Department.
How long have you been employed with the Lewisburg Police Department?
2 years, ma'am.
And has that been your entire career in law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Before that, did you attend the police academy?
Yes, ma'am.
How long was that?
19 weeks, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Officer.
19 weeks.
19.
Hold on a second, what's going on?
Focus the camera.
Well, that's alarming. Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Sands, how long were you in the police academy?
19 weeks.
And that is in West Virginia?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you begin your career with the Lewisburg Police Department, or when did you start work with them?
I believe it was December 26th of 2015.
December
Or
26th?
2014, I'm sorry.
2014. And when you became employed by them, what was your position?
Patrolman.
And were you so on duty with the Lewisburg Police Department on January the 1st of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you on duty that afternoon?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you respond to a call from communications about a stolen license plate that had been detected on Interstate 64 westbound?
Yes, ma'am.
About what time did that happen?
Approximately between 4:30 and 5.
And where did this information come from, if you know?
Which information, ma'am?
I'm sorry, about the stolen license tag that was on the interstate.
It came from our dispatch center, ma'am.
And what was the information that you heard?
We had received a hit from the LPR, the license plate reader, for a possible stolen tag from North Carolina.
Where were you when you received this call?
Within the city limits of Lewisburg. I don't recall exactly where, ma'am.
But you were not on the interstate at that time.
No, ma'am.
Who were you with?
Lieutenant Jeremy Duff.
Were you in his patrol car?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you riding in the front passenger seat?
Yes, ma'am.
And why is that?
He was my training officer for the day, ma'am.
So you were not taking calls or on patrol by yourself at this particular time, is that correct?
Correct, ma'am.
When you were on patrol, did you have to be with an accompanying field training officer?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take you and Lieutenant Dove to get to the interstate?
Approximately 5 minutes, ma'am.
And what happened when you got to the interstate?
We observed a Bolo vehicle pass us traveling westbound on I-64.
I'm sorry, you observed what?
The vehicle that was dispatched from the 911 center with the stolen license plate.
And did you in fact see the license plate that had been given on that vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened next?
Lieutenant Jeremy Dove conducted a traffic stop along I-64.
Were you equipped with a microphone? Did you have your wireless microphone, or was Lieutenant Dove the only one that had audio?
Lieutenant Dove was the only one that had audio.
Describe the traffic stop.
We had conducted the traffic stop there on the side of the interstate. The white Suburban, the red Silverado pulled over in front of the white Suburban. Eric Campbell got out of the white Suburban after Lieutenant Jeremy Dove ordered him back there. Then Edward Campbell approached from the right side of the interstate along the guardrail and along the stop.
And what did you do once the Suburban stopped?
The same thing Lieutenant Dove did. We got out of the patrol car.
And you were getting out of the passenger side of the patrol car, is that correct?
Correct, ma'am.
And once you got out of the patrol car, where did you go?
I was stationary until we ordered Eric Campbell to the rear of the car.
And once Eric Campbell was ordered to the rear of the car, where did you go?
To the rear of the car, ma'am.
And so were you, Lieutenant Dove, and Eric Campbell standing at the back of Lieutenant Dove's patrol car?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that on the passenger side?
Was I on the passenger side, ma'am? Is that?
I'm sorry, at the rear of Lieutenant Dove's patrol car, were you on the passenger side
Yes,
of the
ma'am.
car?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
is that on the shoulder of the road?
Yes, ma'am.
And what happened next?
Edward Campbell had then approached along the shoulder of the road towards us, and then Lieutenant Dove began to question both in regards to the stolen license plate.
How would you describe Eric Campbell as acting?
Very nervous and suspicious.
Suspicious? Why do you say that?
Just very apprehensive to the questions that Lieutenant Dove was asking.
What happened next?
Upon questioning, Edward Campbell then began to fire at us.
So Eric Campbell walks up, and then Edward Campbell walks up. About how long after he was engaged with you did you hear shots fired?
I don't remember, ma'am.
It all happened pretty quickly.
Yes, ma'am.
Were you shot or injured?
Yes, ma'am.
And where were you injured, sir?
I was shot in my back, and then I had fragments in my forehead, or shrapnel in my forehead and ear.
Were you wearing a bulletproof vest?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to fire any shots?
No, ma'am.
Did you draw your weapon?
Yes, ma'am.
In your 5 days on the job, had you ever encountered anything like this before?
No, ma'am.
Were you treated on scene by any emergency medical personnel?
I was just loaded into an ambulance, ma'am.
And where were you taken?
Greenboro Valley Medical Center.
How far is that from the scene where you were?
Approximately 10 miles.
I'm sorry?
Approximately 10 to 15 miles.
And were you treated for your injuries?
No. Yes, ma'am.
How were you treated?
I was bandaged and had surgery at the hospital.
Did someone take pictures of your injuries?
Yes, ma'am.
May I approach Hunter?
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Sands, I'm showing you what's been marked previously as State's Exhibits 3, 4, and 5. I will ask you to look at each one of these and tell me if you recognize them.
Yes, ma'am.
And what are they, sir?
The injuries I sustained.
Are they pictures of those injuries?
Yes, ma'am.
And do these fairly and accurately represent the way that you looked on January the 1st of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
And would these aid you in illustrating your testimony here today?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, the State would move to introduce for illustrative purposes State's Exhibits 3, 4, and 5.
Any objection?
No, sir.
And-
Motion to introduce next, select.
Asked to publish via the television, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Officer Sands, this is State's Exhibit 3. Will you explain to the jury what they're looking at?
That was the injuries I sustained on January 1st. That was the shrapnel or the fragments that was in my forehead.
So you did not sustain a gunshot wound to your head, is that correct?
No, ma'am.
When you say shrapnel, what do you mean by that?
Possibly, I believe it was bullet fragments, or from Lieutenant Dove's mic. Possibly, not really sure where it came from.
So just some kind of foreign object that you picked up out there on the highway?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm showing you the next exhibit, State's Exhibit number 4. Can you describe that?
That was after I had surgery, and they removed those fragments from my forehead.
So you had to have surgery to have the fragments removed, is
Yes,
that correct?
yes, ma'am.
And I'm showing you State's Exhibit 5. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is it?
That was the injury that I sustained from the round hitting my vest.
So where on your body is this?
That's my lower left back.
So that's, you sustained that injury with a bulletproof vest on, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did you stay in the hospital?
One night, ma'am.
How long were you out of work?
2 weeks, ma'am.
Did you have any other interaction with Edward Campbell or Eric Campbell?
No, ma'am.
Did Eric Campbell ask you for help out here on the interstate?
No, ma'am.
Did Eric Campbell tell you that there were 2 dead bodies in the back of that red truck?
No, ma'am.
Did he tell you that his father was armed?
No, ma'am.
I don't have anything further.
Ms. Richardson,
Officer Sands, are you on patrol now with the Lewisburg Police Department?
Yes, sir.
And on this particular day, could you see Mr. Campbell, Eric Campbell, get out of his car, the SUV,
Yes, sir.
and walk back toward you?
Yes, sir.
Where were you? I know you got out of the passenger seat, but when he walked back to you, where did you go?
I was at the passenger side of Lieutenant Dove's patrol car.
I had just a little bit of trouble hearing you on correct, and I may repeat a couple things, but would you speak up or just lean a little bit forward? I'm sorry. Where were you standing? You got out of the passenger seat. Where did you go to?
Once I got out of the passenger seat, I was standing at the passenger side of Lieutenant Dove's patrol car, and then once Eric Campbell walked back, we went to the rear of Lieutenant Dove's patrol car.
Now, when you're in training, are you essentially like Lieutenant Dove's partner? I mean, you're working with him.
Yes, sir.
So you're not like, I've heard of these things called ride-alongs, where someone goes and watches what's going on with the police officer.
No, sir.
You're actually already sworn and you're working with Lieutenant.
Yes, sir.
So you're looking for things as well.
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned that Mr. Campbell was nervous when he came back, and he didn't ever reach in his pocket or anything like that.
No, sir.
He didn't ever physically threaten you at all.
No, sir.
Now, and when Mr. Edward Campbell started walking back toward the patrol car, were you positioned at the back of the patrol car, or were you still standing toward the driver's door?
The back of the patrol car, sir.
How far away was he when you saw him?
Edward, sir.
I'm sorry?
You asking how far Edward was away from me?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry. How far was Edward Campbell from you when you first spotted him walking back towards you?
He was at the front of the Suburban when I spotted him.
So he had to walk all the way beside the Suburban. You could see him as he walked beside the Suburban.
Yes, sir.
And he wasn't showing a gun at that point, was he?
No, sir.
He wasn't doing anything that you saw as necessarily threatening other than walking back towards you.
Correct, sir.
And now, did you stay behind the patrol car as he walked up?
Yes, sir.
And where were you located in relation to Lieutenant Dove and Eric Campbell?
From what I recall, sir, I was standing beside Dove on his right side, I believe.
And were you listening to what, his conversation with
Yes, sir.
Eric Campbell? And as Edward Campbell walked up, how close did he get to you?
A couple feet, sir.
And as he got a couple of feet away from you, you still didn't see the gun, did you?
No, sir.
And then he just started shooting out of the blue, did he?
Yes, sir.
He shot without hesitation.
Yes, sir.
He gave you no warning, did he?
No, sir.
And when that happened, Eric Campbell did nothing to help you, did
No, sir.
he? He didn't return fire,
No, sir.
and he ran away.
Yes, sir.
And Edward Campbell attacked you so quickly you weren't even able to get your gun out.
No, sir.
When, I know that when Lieutenant Dove testified, he said that you were not able to take cover. Were you able to take cover?
No, sir. Not until Officer Arball had arrived on scene.
Well, was Officer Arball there before the shooting started?
Yes, sir.
So he was already there when Edward Campbell started shooting.
Yes, sir.
And when Edward Campbell started shooting, you started trying to get behind his truck, is that right?
Behind Officer Arball's patrol car.
Right. So you tried to take cover at least.
Yes, sir.
And that's when Edward Campbell shot you.
Yes, sir.
And you said you don't know where the injury to your head came from, is that right, Officer Sands?
I didn't feel it. I'm not
Do you even know what they took out of your,
not 100% sure, sir.
so some kind of, could have been from anywhere.
It come from what the incident that occurred.
Right. Happened during that time, but you don't know exactly what hit your head.
No, sir.
And were you aware when we were taking cover that Lieutenant Dove had been able to return fire to Edward Campbell?
No, sir.
You didn't really know exactly, it happened so quickly, you didn't know exactly what was happening, is that correct?
I don't recall, sir.
Thank you, officers.
Yes, sir.
Good record.
Yes, sir, Your Honor. Just to clarify, there was no physical combat with anybody. I mean, the injury that you sustained on your forehead was from the gunshot or from something that it hit. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have anything further.
Thank you, Carl.
But you know it wasn't a gun that Eric Campbell shot, isn't that right?
What's your question, sir?
Is it fair to say that it was not from a gun that Eric Campbell used?
Yes, sir.
Because he didn't use a gun, did he?
No, sir.
He ran away, right?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
No, sir, Your Honor. We would ask that Officer Sanders be excused from this subpoena.
Yeah. Well, thanks, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our lunch and recess at this point. Be mindful, you need to fold your notes up and leave them in your seats. During our lunch and recess period, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. Further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you or to say anything in your presence about your case. If anyone provides you with any information in any form at all, you need to let the sheriff know about it when you come in. Don't have any individual contact with anyone participating in this trial, particularly the lawyers in this case. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphone. And do not form or express any opinion about this case during this time. With that, while everyone else will remain seated, I'm going to excuse the 18 of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room at 2:30 this afternoon. Can we go with this clock? And please be on time. Thank you. Wear your badges. Fine, leave that right, you can close it, but I'll
Close this.
I can't get anything on this thing. Great.
You can't get out through there to go out and go without.
Oh, everybody else needs to stay seated.
Right on file.
She needs to be seated.
Sorry.